What's going on, everybody? I'm Bryan Tann, and here we are again with the 2023 edition of Tann Talks. So how's it going on, guys? It's Bryan Tann, one half of the Plotaholics podcast. And for those that don't know, we do a little thing called Tann Talks. If there's something in television related that I sort of want to shoot the breeze about, and I do not want to stress Shane Wilson out any more than necessary, we do a little thing called Tann Talks. And as I have a rotating list of co-hosts for this edition, I've got a new rotating co-host, and I always say your last name wrong, Melinda, like always. And I swear it's not like I'm trying to throw shade at your other half. It just happens that way.
I don't think anybody has ever pronounced my last name correctly on the first go, so it's all right.
All right, so I'm gonna try this now. Melinda Diemickie.
No, Diemickie.
Diemickie. See, I almost said Diemickie.
No I. Drop the first I. Diemickie.
Oh. Diemickie.
That's it.
Diemickie. Wow. So I guess if Ron were a wrestler, Vince McMahon would have a field day saying his last name. Oh my God, it's Ron Diemickie.
I always laugh. I said we should have made him keep my name because Miller is so much easier for people to say.
Yeah, and it doesn't look as weird either.
Mm-hmm.
It looks weird.
Spelled correctly each time.
Yeah, it looks weird because I comes before E except after C.
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes
or
no
when
sense.
You're spelling my name.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason why Melinda's here, guys, is because at first we were going to do a Walking Dead Tann Talks. But as I thought about it, that's 11 seasons, and people have been talking Walking Dead to death with Talking Dead and so on and so forth. Now, granted, there's tons of people that are talking about The Last of Us, which is our advertised content, but I figured it's in the survival horror genre.
Mm-hmm.
And why the hell not? It's new. It's topical. So that's what we're going to do. And so weekly, as the new episodes drop on Sundays, we'll be talking about this primarily Mondays, because Tuesday we record the Plotaholics. So figure, Mondays we'll talk after the fact. Now, Melinda, you watched this last night. You've never played the games.
Nope.
So this is your first real foray.
So my only real experience with the game is, my husband is a big gamer, and games that I don't feel like playing, but I'm interested in the story, I'll watch him play.
Okay.
I know in the pre-show we were just talking about Mass Effect, and that's how it started. I had no desire to play that game, but I liked the story, so I watched him play.
Okay.
And then I fell in love with it, and then I played it, and but he played Last of Us a little bit. So I watched a very little bit of him playing it. So I have very limited knowledge about what happens in the game, or games now. There's two of them, I think, versus what to expect going into the show. So I actually sat and watched it with him, and I'd pause it. Is this how it happened in the game? Is this how it happened in the game? And he's like, just shut up and watch the show.
So when I first played The Last of Us, I played it on the PlayStation 3, and the prologue killed me. Like, that prologue to the game is so difficult to go through. And I tried to start playing the game again on Saturday night, and the prologue, I knew it was coming, but it still shook me. So I stopped playing. So I got a message the other day before I watched the episode for the first time. A buddy of mine goes, "Have you watched The Last of Us yet?" And I said, "Not yet. Don't ruin it for me." And he goes, "Just be prepared. Even though I know what's coming, I wasn't prepared for what's coming." So we're going to get into that. Now, Melinda, she does a lot like what Katie Salidas does, and even Shane Wilson do. They take notes. Me, I just talk. That's just what I do. So
I didn't want you going, "Hey, do you remember this?" And me going, "I don't know what you're talking about." I can look back and go, "Oh, okay." Or if it's things I'm like, I need to research this. So I make a note and then frantically on the laptop. What does this mean? What did I miss?
So, The Last of Us, for those that don't know, is a post-apocalyptic video game that was originally released in 2013, where it sees the Earth has been ravaged not so much by a zombie virus, but a fungal virus. And it follows survivor Joel Miller. You guys related?
Maybe a distant relative.
Okay,
Possibly.
fair enough. Across different universes. Okay, but it features Joel Miller and a young girl named Ellie, and he is escorting her from Boston to Wyoming for a medical apparatus when it's discovered that she is immune to the fungal virus, to the fungal infection. I can't call it a virus because it's not a virus; it's a fungal infection. So, so that's a little bit of what it's about. Of course, the one thing that we kind of have to talk about, we'd be kind of remiss if we didn't discuss, is the racial changes, because in the original game, Joel is Caucasian.
Mm-hmm.
In this, of course, we have Pedro, the amazing Pedro Pascal as Joel Miller. And we have Gabriel Luna, aka Robbie Reyes from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., who is
I know him as the Terminator from the last Terminator movie.
Yeah, and he was in the last Terminator film, Terminator Dark Fate, as his brother Tommy. Mm-hmm. And we get Thandie Newton's daughter, Nico Parker, as Sarah. Now, I haven't really been paying attention to any of the whining about the race bending of this. I know that I'm sure that there has been, but I haven't been paying attention to it. So for someone who's watched the game being played, at least in my opinion, it doesn't change anything when you see Pedro Pascal's sort of take on the character. It doesn't.
I think a lot of the hate I read was actually more for Bella Ramsey as Ellie than it was directed as Pedro Pascal for Joel. And I read an interview with her just in prep for this show, mm-hmm. where she said, I'm not going on social media because I know the comments are there, mm-hmm. and I know the hate is there, and I just can't be bothered with it. And then I was like, wait, what are people saying about her? Because she was a tiny, pint-sized little badass in Game of Thrones.
Right.
How could anybody hate on her for anything?
Yeah.
But
it's because she came out as gender fluid, or mm-hmm. Because she's gender fluid. So it's once again these He-Man woman haters that are mad at women mm-hmm. for being women, yep. and not wanting them. And it's like, dude, get over yourself. Number one, she's a phenomenal actress. She was very scary in Game of Thrones. Her and Arya Stark were the main ones I was afraid of in Game of Thrones. I didn't care about the Mountain or the Hound. I didn't care about them. It was her and Arya Stark that I was worried about.
Characters you don't expect.
Exactly. And Pedro Pascal as well had a brief stint on Game of Thrones. He got his chiclets knocked out, which was kind of hilarious. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about this opening scene where it takes place in 1968, and you're having one of those Mike Douglas, Dick Cavett style talk shows. Yes, I'm dating myself a little bit. Where you have a virologist, you have two virologists talking about, illnesses and diseases. And first of all, the characterization here alone, you're getting hit right away with you got John Hannah, and I'm looking for the other fella's name, and Christopher Heyerdahl.
Christopher Heyerdahl, I don't know if you know this. Christopher Heyerdahl is almost in anything that is filmed in Canada. He will find his way into it. He's in Stargate. He's in Supernatural. He's in, like, you're watching it and it's like, okay, it's kind of like Kevin Bacon. Like, where's this guy going to, or Mark Shepard? Right. I know him from somewhere. I know this guy. He's in every sci-fi or every horror or whatever. If it's filmed in Canada, he really is. He's in it.
Right. And he's in so much. I mean, he was in Supernatural. He was in Smallville. He's been in True Blood. He was in Twilight. This is literally the guy that is in everything, but you don't know his name. But his presence is always so Just
Yes, it's like whack-a-mole.
he really is. And then of course you got
Mhm.
John Hannah, who, if you don't remember, number one, he was in Agents of Shield. He plays Evie's brother in the Mummy movies with the great Brendan Fraser. So I think that they
Oh, so
picked
that's who
two.
that guy was.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. That's where you've seen him from. He's in that whole series. He was also in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 2002. So you got two guys who you see in so many things that really get like that. All of that discussion, and shout out to Josh Brenner as well, who plays the talk show host. These guys really get you geared up for the story, for what
Yes.
we're gonna see, and really spit a lot of truth because this fungal plague is a real thing. Like this is real. Like this fungus really does this, and the fact that he brought up, so if the Earth heats up, it's gonna have to find a way to survive.
Hmm.
Now, of course, epidemiologists have been saying that the chances of this happening are slim to none, but slim is still a thing.
Yeah, but I
So,
want to say 10 years ago, they said the same thing about superbugs that were penicillin resistant. Oh, well, we don't really have to worry about that. Well, turns
right,
out maybe we do.
we do. Yes, we do. So, I mean, hey, if you start hearing reports of crazy attacks and whatnot, it's probably because some people have a fungal infection in their brain and they're going to pass it on to you. So,
Well, I mean, think about what you hear in the news, right?
mhm.
You can probably spout off how many antibiotics off the top of your head, right?
um,
We have a system for
right,
fighting this thing. And viruses, we have antivirals, but viruses just kind of do their things. We don't know a lot about
fungal
fungal
infections.
infections. And
No.
even the ones we do know
Oh,
about are mostly either externals, like athlete's foot kind of thing,
mm-hmm,
or if they're internal, it's a lot of starve, because they feed on sugars and stuff,
mm-hmm.
starve it out. But
Right.
it's not one that's really in the mainstream as like your common everyday person to go, oh yeah, I know how to treat a fungus. Whereas,
Yeah.
oh, I have a cold. Okay, well, this is what you got to do. Or, oh, hey, I have the flu. Well, this is what you got to do.
Right.
Hey, I have this
Tough,
random fungus. What?
tough
What is
acting
that?
to acting ain't gonna fix this.
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
Well, not to mention that the medications that we do have for fungal infections take a very long time to work,
Yeah.
and anything that we take internally for it, you run the risk of liver damage.
Yep.
So this is a lot more deadly. And we see that as we fast forward to 2003 and we meet Joel's daughter, Sarah. And the one thing that I really appreciate that's a big difference from the game is that we get a lot of time with Sarah.
Yes. My son and I
Um,
were just talking about that this morning because he's played the game and we were talking about the differences between the two.
mhm,
And I said that I like that her death was a little bit more impactful
right,
because it's not just, oh, it's the main character's daughter and you're sad because it's a kid or a teenager or whatnot. But you got to know her as a person, even just for a little bit of time.
right. And spoiler alert, it's already in the description, but spoiler alert because we are going to be doing a deep dive through this episode. You're absolutely right because when you play the game, you only get to play as Sarah for like maybe 5-10 minutes, and then it's all cinematic, and then it both the show and the game do an amazing job of building the tension. We
Yes.
see Sarah going through her typical day as a teenager, her relationship with her father, her relationship with her uncle, her relationships period with her neighbors in
Mm-hmm.
school and everything. But then we start to sort of see, and we saw a little bit of this buildup in Shaun of the Dead as well, how people are just going on with their lives despite the news reports. You only really saw this in this magnitude in Shaun of the Dead and in Fear of the Walking Dead, where
Yes.
life is still going on while this threat is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate the world building and how it just continues to show that if this happens, we are not prepared. With in the disinformation campaigns that have run rampant in our news cycle over the last almost 10 years makes it even more dangerous, I think, for something
And
like
that's
this
one of the
to
things
go on.
I think that we'll get to it later in the episode in the show, I'm sure. But that was one of the things I always have when I watch these survival horror or even just like apocalyptic survival, you know, like a Jericho or whatever kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
is the amount of people who they're like blissfully unaware of what's going on around them.
Yeah.
And then you have the handful of people who are so keyed in that every single little thing is this new breakout or new whatever.
Right.
And they're like, oh, I'm so ready. And then it happens and they have no clue what to do and what's going on.
Exactly.
You know, and
Yeah.
it's, well, if you hear it, like when COVID happened, right? You heard people talking about it and everyone's like, well, it's nothing. It's just another flu. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were people in the know who were like, no, we should probably keep an eye on this. And it's interesting to see how you can, like, as a society, we put these blinders on to, that can't happen here. That's fiction.
Right. Oh, exactly. And you're hearing the news broadcasts in the background of all of this stuff happening. And everyone's just going about their days. Joel just goes to work like it's any old
Yep.
regular day, blah, blah, blah. And you even see it when the shit really starts to hit the fan. Oh, this is only happening in cities. Yeah, but
Yeah.
didn't they take Nana into the city?
Mm-hmm.
Because you start to notice there's something wrong with the Nana character of the next door neighbors. And it just builds and it builds. And I really like how it's similar but different. And one of the things that was brought up, and you start to notice in the show, Joel in the games, and I saw this written somewhere, and it really made sense. For Joel being a middle-aged man, because they establish his age in the prologue, he's in his mid to late 30s. And when the time skip happens for the main story, it's
He's my
20
age.
years
He's
later.
36.
Yeah, he's about 36 years old.
Yeah.
And then, but you still see him because he works in construction, and you see his movements are of a guy in his mid 30s where his body is starting to feel the ravages of a manual labor job and living.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that as well, because it really shows, because you see where he's carrying Sarah after their car accident, how, he's not moving superhuman. Because I was even saying when I was playing the game, man, even at 36 years old and you're in good shape, if you've been working construction all your life, you're not running, carrying 100-pound girl.
Right.
You're walking with a hard pace, but you ain't running. And we saw that in the show, which I really appreciated. And then, of course, we see where the military man fires on Joel, wings him, mortally wounds Sarah. And that is, in the game and in the show, that lets you know what we're in store for. And so what I want to ask you, as we're already 18 minutes in, as a Walking Dead fan, how do you feel this opening prologue compares? Now, I know it's two different mediums, comics versus video games, but they're both coming to the TV realm.
Right.
I personally feel like I feel like what The Walking Dead got the most right happened within the first two seasons. And I really think and I really feel like this is a breath of fresh air based on what we got in the last 4 seasons of The Walking Dead, where this is straight up in your face punch in the gut, where with The Walking Dead, this stuff sort of just became commonplace, but now we're getting it again, but it just feels fresher.
So I think I've seen all of Walking Dead. I've seen most of Fear. I watched Tales from the Walking Dead. I watched the other clip that kind of talks about the Commonwealth and kind of what that's going to mean for the later spinoffs. But I think what Walking Dead got right in the beginning was the zombies were there to set the plot and were the main, like your main villain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't really see the breakdown of society. We went from Rick gets shot, he's in the hospital, to a couple months later, and society has completely collapsed. And, you've got these little pockets of people. And you had a more classic concept of a zombie. They were slow, they weren't smart, I mean, you had a handful, like the Morgan's wife with a doorknob,
Mm-hmm.
um, that could use tools or use their memories, but they were slow, they were shambling, they weren't a speedy threat. They were a threat, but not a speedy threat.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a little bit of cardiovascular endurance, you could probably outrun them in small numbers, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it shifted from the zombies as the focal point to more of a commentary on people. What do people do when society's not there to tell them what to do?
Right.
And shifting from, okay, the zombies are the bad guys, to no, they're just kind of background set dressing to explain why we're looking at these relationships between people and, people falling to their baser instincts and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Last of Us gets right, and I really enjoyed it, was the zombies, or the whatever you want to call them, are so radically different.
Yeah. They're
Like, you see
fast
Nana in
moving.
the background, and it's the twitching, and you just see her arms twitching, and I'm like, oh shit, here's this lady. Sorry, I
No,
should
it's
ask that in
fine. It's
advance what
fine.
the
No,
what
it's
the
fine. It's fine.
language
It's
content was.
fine.
They make this big point of Nana is catatonic. She can't feed herself. She can't
Right.
move. The
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Mrs. Cooper. I don't know if they kept the name the same as from the game. Is saying, well, I don't even know why I talked to her. She's deaf.
Right.
Okay, well, these are all functions that for an organism to survive, they need.
Right.
They need to be able to hear. They need to be able to move. They need to be able to feed.
Right.
And so you go from this setup of, she is what she is, to, Sarah gets in the house and there's Nana chomping on Grandma, or, Mrs. Cooper or whatever, and her head
Mm-hmm.
snaps up and she launches herself across the kitchen, and you're like, holy crap. She heard Sarah come in. She saw she was there. She's clearly moving.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
they kind
almost
of kept that through the
it's
thing. So like when they got out of the truck and they turn, and Joel is holding Sarah because she's hurt a leg at this point, and they turn down that aisle, that alleyway, and there is no slow pickup of that one creature from what it's feeding on. It just sits straight up and, like,
and goes.
Olympic leaps towards them in the room. It goes. So the threat was a lot more, I don't want to say real, but it was a lot more immediate than I could
Right.
probably outrun these guys, because there's only a handful of them too. There's no way. There is no way you can outrun these things.
Right.
And I
what
really
I really
appreciated that.
same because it also sort of shows where this isn't just a virus that takes a hold of what's there. This fungus has to manipulate its host to spread itself. And
Mhm.
I believe that that's what was happening with Nana. She was getting more movement because the fungus is flowing through her body to make her more able to be
Right.
a suitable host. And then, so
Yeah, to take control of these systems it needs.
right. So the prologue is very, very, very well done. When we fast forward now into 2023 Boston, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just to go back before we're still in the prologue bit, is the other thing I appreciated, and I know from the games it's spread through spores.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really see spores. It's airborne, and you're like, oh, okay, well, you might see like a cloud, like a poof cloud or whatever, but
Yeah,
that's
in the
not scary.
games,
There's something innate when you see these tendrils come out of Nana's mouth,
yeah,
right? There is, as a viewer,
and that's what
there
she's
is,
using to pass.
right. And so there is something in your own, like, at least it was in mine, you have those people, like, I'm one of them. They've got that tryptophobia, like with the little holes and things, and it just kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah.
That's the same kind of thing. You see these tendrils come out of her mouth, and it's so unnatural looking that it just kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies. And it's,
it really
you get that
did.
base
It was
instinct of, oh my God, what is this?
That was really creepy. And
yes.
Yeah, because in the games, there are certain sections that you can't go into because there's a spore cloud. And I'll tell you what, I felt a lot of that when I was watching the movie and reading the book, The Girl with All the Gifts, where it's a similar thing. And, so that was interesting. I like the take, though, because in the games, they bite, they transmit via biting. Or if you walk into a building with the spores. Now, granted, this is only the first episode, so they might bring that aspect of it back. But yeah, the little, ugh,
yeah,
ugh.
Yeah, it's something very there's like a visceral reaction in watching that. Like, that's not natural. Like,
No.
that is just weird looking. And I get logically spores make sense, like scientifically speaking, spores make sense. That's how fungus is now. That's how they move, right?
Right.
But it's not as scary.
No, it's not.
And
I think
I think that's a lot of, with the current pandemic we're just coming out of, or, still in, depending on how you look at it, you couldn't see it.
right.
So it was hard to say, well, what do you mean just, going into a room can make me sick? That's a really hard thing to think about. Like if you think of the flu, you think of little kids, they're wiping their arms on their sleeves and touching you, and that's how it transferred.
Right.
So spores are scary, but not immediately scary. They don't give you
Right.
that same gut check that these tendrils coming out of her mouth did. And you're like, oh, this
Right.
is gross.
Yeah, it's gross, and it's just frightening. And I think, much to your point, the pandemic just sort of makes the terror of something like this worse.
Yeah,
So
because you
this is a
watch
good
how
time.
fast. I mean,
How
we had
fast
toilet
this
paper
stuff goes.
palooza. You watch how quickly people just can't, but then you also are watching for how are the people going to come together?
Right. And of
And
course,
I think we see that later.
Yeah, well, we do. We see people, the military has taken over and have basically created these pockets of police states. And first
I
of
do want
all,
to give a shout out to Austin, Texas, by the way. I got so excited when it said
when you
Austin,
saw,
Texas. I'm like 15 minutes outside of Austin city limits. So I'm watching it going, I think, did they film on 6th Street? So I'm squinting. It's like, 183 and 71. I know where that intersection is. So I was like, I always get a little excited when they film somewhere where I could theoretically actually be.
oh, I do the same thing when something is
shout out
in
to Austin.
Pittsburgh. I did the same thing when I watched Dogma, and I was like, I know where that's at. I know where that's at. Ha ha! So we see 2023 Boston. We see the walls, and you want to talk about gripping. You see the little kid walking up, and we see how they've got the technology still to know who's infected and who's not, even if they're just a carrier.
Yeah, check the chart on the wall.
Well, not even, yeah, where it's like a bite on the leg, it's like a couple of days. If it's like more on the arm, it's like another day. But if it's like on the neck or somewhere vital, it's a matter of hours or minutes.
Yeah. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. And and you see how they brought the little kid in. The lady's talking to the little kid. She gives the kid the shot. And then we see Joel and them throwing the little kid onto the pyre.
Man, I had a kid about that age, and I'm going to be honest, that was a hard scene for me.
Yeah, you know
because I've got kids that age, right? And so it was hard because I'm like, man, what if that was my kid?
Right.
And so that was hard to watch. Like, I appreciate, again, as a mom, I can appreciate how that soldier was talking to the little girl and trying to, calm her down and keep her while they did their thing. So the little girl didn't see it coming, and she was kind of at peace when it happened. Yeah. And it wasn't as brutal, like, oh, we're just gonna, take your head off now. Like,
right.
It was, or
I definitely like that.
We have to shoot you in the head, kind of thing, like Walking Dead style. So
right. They literally just gave them a shot so the kid would just go to sleep and stay asleep, which I thought, yeah, you're right. I'm glad to see that the military in that regard is humane. But then, then we get to Joel 20 years later, and he's just grizzled, worn down, just surviving, working as many shifts as he can, drug dealing, smuggling, doing everything he has to do to survive. I really like the fact that Joel is not a good guy.
Yeah, and you can see the fatigue, the constant, the fight or flight fatigue that, and then the PTSD on top of it, it kind of all comes together really well. And Pedro Pascal did a really good job of not being a plucky, like you said in the beginning, he's not a plucky little young hero who's sprinting around doing all this stuff. Like, he's a tired old man.
Yeah, and he's a tired old man that still got it.
Yes.
And I really, so we see him doing this work. You see him, you see his relationship with this guard, and it's like it's almost like he's only going through the motions. He's living because he has no choice. He's not gonna kill himself. He's not gonna put himself in a position to die. But he's waiting. He's just waiting for something. He's trying to find his brother Tommy, because we find out later on Tommy became really, really big in on the Fireflies. They had a falling out, and he left. So he's trying to find his brother. He's trying to get his brother back. And then we meet Tess. Tess is trying to get them their truck so they can get the hell out of there.
Yep.
And then, of course, it's just like in the game. Their stuff got stolen and was sold out from under them. And, then we get to meet Marlene from the Fireflies. Now, I really appreciate that they got the same voice actress that played Marlene in the games to play her in the show. And I really appreciate that.
I want to say I read somewhere they got a handful of people to come back. So the guy who voiced Joel and Ellie, they're going to be back as different characters.
Yes.
And me as a music nerd, I was super excited to see that the composer of the two games came back and did all the work for the TV show too. So I think that is really kind of neat to tie all of that together.
I think that this is definitely something where it's not just a labor of love, but a lot of time and care. Because you figure this was announced 2019, 2020, and we're finally getting it. A lot of care and time went into this. And it wasn't just because of the pandemic.
Well, I think it was supposed to be a movie too. And then they couldn't gain any traction as a movie. And then it shifted to a TV series.
I can't remember. I know they've also said that they're not going to make some of the mistakes that certain shows have had. They're going to tell this story, and that's it.
And that's it. And then season 2, they're going to tell game 2, and then that's it.
More likely than not, unless season 1 is going to be like a portion of the game and blah blah blah. I've purposefully not tried to dig into a lot of the stuff because I just want to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm not a news pundit. I'm a TV fan, I'm a film fan, I'm a story fan. That's what I am. So we find out here that, so we meet Ellie, who is just this Spitfire. They're asking her questions, and of course those who played the game know why they're asking her the questions. And because, spoiler alert, Ellie has been bitten. But her bite is 3 weeks old, and it has actually had time to heal, which for Marlene and for the Fireflies, that's a huge deal. Because that they're not going to take this to the military because they're anti-military. They have their own doctors, their own people that they're going to try to get her to. And of course, due to Joel and his partner Tess, where in the games it's very subtly hinted at that they've got a relationship. Here in the show, it's more in our face at this point that Joel and Tess are in a relationship. They're partners in all things. Right. And because Joel also has this huge grudge against Marlene where she's like, listen, you can get everything that you need to go find your brother. We just want you to get Ellie here. That's it. And, we get to this point where they get outside the walls. Joel runs into this this soldier that he had been working with before.
Yeah.
And as soon as he turns that gun on to Ellie, you knew, I was expecting his beatdown of the guy to be sort of more brutal, theatrically brutal, but it wasn't. It was real life brutal.
And see, I think, so I was watching that and you so he gets that PTSD flashback, right, of when he was carrying Sarah. Mm-hmm. And then when he pops his head up after, what he did to this soldier, he's got this blank look, he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know what time it is. So I kind of interpreted that as this is what he wished he would have done when he was running with Sarah. Put her down and go after this guy. And so I think in Joel's mind, and I could be wrong, my interpretation was in his mind at that moment, he was in 2013. He was not in 2023.
Yeah, he was in 2003. He was in 2003 beating the hell out of his daughter's murderer. Yeah, absolutely.
He was completely dissociated from where he was presently in that moment. Right. He looks up and he's got this almost blank look in his face, what just happened? He didn't know.
You feel that, and I think that any parent, you felt that.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking about because my boy, he's about to turn 14, and I have a 8, almost 9-year-old niece, and it's that would have been me if something, and I'll tell you what though, that I think in that moment we really feel for Joel. We don't care that he's a drug dealer. We don't care that he's a smuggler. I mean, in a lot of ways we don't, because I mean, look, Han Solo is a drug smuggler in his own way too. Spices drugs in the Star Wars universe, and he's one of the most beloved characters of all time. We don't care of any of Joel's weaknesses of character at this point, because we are Joel in that moment, because we all have a child, little brother, little sister, niece, nephew, whatever. But we also find out that Ellie is bitten and she's a carrier. And that really, now keep in mind, the only of the infected that we've seen so far was in the prologue.
Yeah.
We've
and
seen
girl
no other
in the beginning.
Yeah. Who wasn't even fully turned yet.
Right.
So this first episode I feel like we'll get to that when we get to our ratings. Matter of fact, that's basically the end of the episode. So
it is. I can say cinematically, I'm a sucker for a really good ending shot. And them disappearing into Boston and the collapsing skyscrapers with the storm behind it, given that shadow off, it really set the tone for this is not, because they tell you, there are slavers out there and there's this out there and these gangs and you, okay, sure, just like every other, horror movie or whatever. But then to see that, they're not going into what we know of as Boston, right? Or just like how Atlanta was in The Walking Dead. It was just kind of run down, but you didn't get that ominous, what is going to happen when they, in the next episode when we go into the city and see what that's like as they're traveling to wherever they're going. That was a really, really well shot closing scene.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the biggest difference, though, because you figure The Walking Dead, anytime we've seen a city, it's only been a few months to maybe a year after the fall. When we have the big time skips, we don't really go into cities anymore.
Right.
Of The Walking Dead. So to see what what society and what the world is going to look like after a 20-year collapse, I mean, we even saw the little bit of it where the vegetation is just taking over everything, and the unnaturalness of the steel and the brick is literally just another part of the landscape.
And it's so dark.
It really is.
There's no ambient light, especially with the storm, because there's that storm coming in and it's raining. So there's no ambient light from the moon or the stars or anything. It's just pitch black, and the only thing lighting it up are these, these lightning shots from behind these buildings. So you really kind of get the feel of, the quarantine zone may suck, but they've got light, they've got
shelter,
semblance of shelter and safety, even if it's not, even if it's just a mirage. And I think Ellie actually makes that comment. She said, "I've never been outside the wall. It's so dark out here." I think it's something like that, and you don't get that because at that point you're still in the QZ. And then they go out there, and even when they're right by the wall, it's still lit.
Right.
From the cars and the spotlights. And then they head out, and it's just pitch
black. And I think that's the scariest part for us as humans is what we can't see. That's why, and we were talking about this, Shane and I were talking about this while we were talking about Nope, which, in case you missed it, you can check out our episode of Nope here on the YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. What makes the darkness so scary is what we can't see. When we see something frightening during the day, it's scary because that's what it is, but it's the fact that we have light that gives us the visual representation. It's what we can't see that truly terrifies us. I mean, when you're a kid and you see something shadow, you can't see it. You just see what your mind is telling you that you're seeing in the light. But when someone comes up behind you in the dark, it terrifies you way more. And we're set up for something big. All right, so we're going to bring in Bartender Smiley because for those that don't know, for the uninitiated, we have a system here for how well we like something here at the Plotaholics. So let's get a bartender Smiley in on here so we can close this one out. This first episode of Last of Us. Whoops, wrong one.
The Plotaholics rating system for the movies is a pretty simple system. Basically, they rate movies based on how many shots it takes to get through them. So if you got a good movie and you get through it all the way sober, then it takes 0 shots to get through the movie. And then if you got a really bad movie, then it could take up to 5 shots to get through the whole thing. I think you can try to figure out the middle part yourself. So, what can I get you?
All right, Melinda, your first sit down here on Tann Talks. Give us your overarching thoughts, and then your rating of this first episode of The Last of Us, titled "When You're Lost in the Darkness."
So overall, I really appreciated for the non-game people. I got a really good feel in this episode for the environment they're living in, who the characters are, what their driving motivations are. I like some of the ethical questions that they kind of threw at you right from the get-go. If you're driving down the road and you see a family with kids, are you going to stop or not? Everyone thinks they know what they're going to do until they have to do it. And I really appreciated that realness from the characters. I also really appreciated the concept of the fungal zombie or creature or whatever they are, and how radically different it was from every other zombie flick you've ever seen in your life. It's not a perfect episode. I don't think anything really is. I really like how it's set up. I really like where it's going. I'm excited to watch the next episode. So it's not like they lost me, because we've all had those shows. So if I understood the shot system correctly.
Yeah, so 0 is it's perfect. They hit everything they wanted. 5 is you have to put yourself in an alcohol-induced coma to even remotely
get to the end.
through.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm going to give it a 1, and that's only because that's going to gives me just a taste, and I want to come back for more, so that I don't have to drink anything to get through it. Like, it was good. I have lots of questions. Like I said, I took notes with questions, and I want the answers. So just a little bit, just to get me through, because I want more.
I don't know what. What's weird is that I have a business phone, and for whatever reason, it always does the test of the emergency broadcast system, and I have no clue why. Anywho, all right, cool. No, I dig it. I like that. I'm going to agree with you. I'm definitely going to give this a 1-shot rating as well, just because I don't want to sit there and say it's perfect. It's an amazing adaptation. I love how it not only sort of adapted the source material, it stayed true to the source material while also making it its own thing. And that's definitely something that I really appreciate. The less we talk about the Gus Van Sant shot-for-shot remake of Psycho, the absolute better. I think that Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, I want to see their chemistry grow to the way it was in the game. I truly hope that that's there, because that's a very, very important aspect of the game and the story, is the Ellie-Joel dynamic, and how Ellie and Joel are like, how Ellie becomes like a surrogate daughter to Joel, even though that's not what he's looking for. The characters are just absolutely amazing. The characterization, the dilemma of morality versus survival is definitely just amazing to see. And I'll tell you the truth, I'm really looking forward to seeing more of Gabriel Luna as well. And I definitely am excited to see some of the additional the characters, the voice actors from the games, because we're going to see Troy Baker, who originally voiced Joel, and Ashley Johnson, who originally voiced Ellie. I'm excited for them. I'm excited for when they get to Pittsburgh, because that was one of my favorite parts of the game. When they're in Pittsburgh, I like to see my hometown completely and utterly decimated.
That's how I felt
So
about Austin. It's just Friday night on 6th Street. This isn't anything crazy.
yeah, right. So, yep. So I'm definitely on board with you. I'm definitely going to give this a one-shot rating. If you enjoyed this episode, why don't you click a like, subscribe to the channel so you can be updated when we have new videos coming up. Next week, we're going to be doing episode 2 of The Walking Dead, which is entitled Infected. This is going to be very, very exciting because I believe this is
Wait,
where,
Last of
we're
Us,
going to...
not Walking Dead.
That's what I meant. I meant Last of Us, not The Walking Dead. Whoops.
Okay, I'm just making sure I'm watching the right show.
Yeah, so and I'm very excited to see Joel's further reaction to when he has to really deal with the fact that Ellie's infected and what his job is. So this is going to be very, very interesting to see. And we're gonna record that episode on Monday. So that way, fresh eyes, fresh talk, get it fresh out there. And just sort of go from there. And make sure you check in with the Plotaholics podcast, where we're dropping our new episodes every Tuesday. So busy beginning of the week for the Plotaholics podcast. We're actually going to be doing the Nicolas Cage film. Crap, I can't remember what it's called now. But
the one with Pedro Pascal?
No, it's with Nicolas Cage.
Well, it was Nicolas Cage and did one with Pedro Pascal, and that movie was that movie's a trip.
I'm trying to, because this block of films, this block of Plotaholics films, we're doing movies that came out in 2022. So I'm looking at.
I'm curious if it's
The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. That's the one.
Pedro Pascal is in that, and I watched it, and
Yeah.
I got to the end of that movie, and man, I had some opinions.
Okay.
And that was
All right.
going into Last of Us with Pedro Pascal, and I'm like, okay, I've
Wow.
seen that, and I've seen all this stuff. So yeah, that'll be an interesting episode to listen to.
So this is now an unofficial Pedro Pascal block of the Plotaholics. I'm so excited. You cannot get enough of Pedro Pascal. So, all right. So next week, episode 2 of The Last of Us, followed by the very next day, The Unbreakable Weight of Massive Talent, starring Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal. So, with that being said, I'm Bryan Tann. That's Melinda Diemickie. No I. Close. I'm going to get it eventually. But that ends our very first 2023 edition of Tann Talks.